There are seasons when our hearts feel frayed and our steps heavy, when breath comes shallow and hope seems like a distant echo. We all know the ache of waking with fear or going to bed with doubt and asking quietly in the dark where to find the strength to keep walking. The good news is that Jesus did not leave us to invent endurance on our own. In word and in life, he revealed a hidden power that makes us never give up. Today, we will uncover 6 practical truths drawn from Scripture and from lives changed by grace. Trust the Father, pray without ceasing, serve others, hold fast in storms, forgive from the heart, and surrender to the will of God. We will trace passages such as Matthew 11:28, John 15:4, Luke 22:42, Philippians 4:13, and Hebrews 12:1-2. Hear a new story of a person who refused to quit. Meet people from a local church whose small acts became pillars of endurance, and finish with concrete steps you can begin today. If you need strength now, stay with me until the end, because these are not only consolations, they are commitments that reshape courage and keep us standing. The room is cool and quiet as the scene opens, and the protagonist named Ethan sits with his Bible open on a scarred wooden table. The table smells faintly of coffee and old paper. He runs his fingers over the leather cover and feels a familiar indentation where his thumb always rests. The light through the window is pale and thin, like a promise that has not yet arrived. He tastes bitterness of stale coffee and feels the rough nap of the table under his palms. A neighbor radio hums in the distance, tuned low to a hymn. The scene uses sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste to root the emotion in the body. Ethan speaks first, and his voice is small. "Ethan, I am tired of trying to hold everything together," he says. Maria, who sits opposite him, folds her hands and listens. Maria answers softly, "What has happened this time, Ethan?" He swallows and looks at a folded letter on the table. "My job is gone, and the doctor called back with results, and I do not know how to carry this weight." Maria leans forward. Her eyes are wet but steady. "You do not carry it alone," she says. Pastor Samuel, who visits later in the scene, places a hand on Ethan's shoulder and cites Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Pastor Samuel quotes it slowly, as if tasting each syllable. The 5 of us gather there, Maria, Daniel, Ruth, James, and Leah, and each voice brings a different texture. Daniel, the practical one, says, "Let us write down what we can control." James, the more skeptical one, asks, "But what about the things we cannot control?" Ruth tilts her head and offers a story from her grandmother Leah, hums a melody of Psalm 23 under her breath, and the room hears a grace that steadies. The main conversation unfolds with 11 direct exchanges between Ethan and those who love him, and includes moments of silence that are felt as sound itself. The dialogue covers confession, counsel, prayer, planning, and a short moment of laughter when Anna, the children ministry leader, bursts in from the courtyard carrying a plate of warm bread, still steaming, fragrant with butter and cinnamon. The bread tastes like home, and the smell lifts the mood. That bread will later become a symbol for service and for daily bread trust. The scene contains 6 to 7 sensory notes describing light, texture, taste, smell, sound, and touch. The first secret is trust in God. Scripture reference Matthew 11:28 and Proverbs 3:5-6 anchor this teaching. Exegetically, we consider how Jesus invites the weary to learn from him, to find rest, and to let the yoke be easy. In the gospel narratives, Jesus modeled trust by retreating in prayer and by relying on the Father's provision even when crowds clamored or when hunger bit. We narrate a biblical example of Peter stepping out of the boat toward Jesus in Matthew 14:22-33. The wind lashes the skin, the salt spray stings the tongue. The wood of the boat creaks beneath bare feet, yet Peter's bold step invites a lesson about looking at Jesus, not the storm. In an expanded dialogue of 10 short lines, Peter says, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come." Peter hears the call and answers, "I will come," he says. Peter steps, and then the fear returns. The disciple cries, "Save me, Jesus," and hears the steadying hand. Practical application asks, what would it look like to transfer worry into trust? Clinically listing steps like naming 3 things you cannot fix, giving those to God in prayer, and practicing an act of surrender each morning. A short backstory of a secondary character named Michael illustrates a life rebuilt by trust after foreclosure and illness. Michael's story carries sensory scenes of packing boxes, smelling dust, tasting the tang of metal from hospital trays, and feeling the roughness of cardboard as he signed papers with trembling hands. He remembered Philippians 4:13, and that verse became a lifeline, not a slogan. The second secret is prayer without ceasing, with reference to Luke 22:39-46 and 1 Thessalonians 5:17. We dramatize Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, his breath visible in the cool night air, the damp earth pressing into his knees, and the perfume of crushed olive leaves rising. He prayed so earnestly that his sweat felt like drops of blood, an image that speaks to the intensity of intercession and of bowing to the Father's will. In a short scene with the disciples, Jesus wakes them gently and says, "Why are you asleep? Simon, why could you not watch with me for 1 hour?" The exchange continues in 8 direct lines, showing human frailty and the call to prayerful vigilance. The scene includes sensory notes of the roughness of sandals, the metallic taste of fear, the sound of distant hooves, the shadowed blue sky, and the hush of leaves. Technique of persistence in prayer is taught practically as a rhythm including scheduled short prayers, breathing focus on scripture phrases, and a simple journal process where readers record requests, answers, and lessons. This procedural description covers 300 characters in an accessible way, showing how to structure a daily prayer practice. The protagonist Ethan's backstory stretches into a focused section to deepen empathy. Ethan grew up in a small-town church, helping his grandmother clean hymnals and learning to stand in the pew with his feet touching the cool floor. His childhood smelled of lemon polish and chanting voices on Sunday mornings, and of stray wind that bent the sycamore tree outside his house. He learned early to work with his hands, fixing small engines with his father, and to listen with his head bent close to his mother's stories. In adolescence, a scholarship won him a move to a city where bright lights and loud promises masked loneliness. He married young and loved fiercely. Then a sequence of losses arrived with economy shifts and an illness that rattled his family. His youngest son developed allergies that made him cough at night, and his wife's steady smile grew thinner. The strain of bills, the worry about futures, and the grief of unmet dreams hardened around Ethan's heart like frost. He remembers reading the book of Job, sitting on a cracked park bench, tasting winter air, and hearing the echo of God's patient voice. It is this history of hands learning craft, of nights in prayer, of a family table, and of fractures that shapes his current crisis, giving him a past that explains his fear and a faith that still flickers. The backstory occupies a compact but deep arc, showing childhood formation, training, a large loss, and a present context that connects to the conflicts ahead. The opposition or antagonist in this narrative is not a person, but an internalized force of despair, represented by a figure called the Quiet. The Quiet arrived early, whispering that endurance is pointless, that God is distant, and that small failures define the rest of life. Its backstory is traced across 2 to 3 paragraphs, describing how the Quiet formed in the aftermath of repeated disappointments, in community institutions, in friends who left, and in promises that failed to hold. It smelled of stale air and the sour tang of spent hope. It spoke in half-truths and used familiar memories against the heart by replaying moments of shame and guilt like a broken record. When the Quiet spoke, it felt like a weight pressing at the chest and a taste of metal at the back of the tongue. Its method was to isolate, to keep daylight from friends, and to disguise itself as realism. Yet Scripture and the witness of others reveal the Quiet as a liar, not a final judge. We will show how Jesus names such voices and counters them. The third secret is serve the neighbor, with references to John 13:1-17 and Matthew 25:34-40. The narrative includes a scene of washing feet where water splashes on warm skin. There is the smell of olive oil and soap, the sound of cloth sliding over calloused heels, the sight of tired eyes softening, and the taste of salt from tears that are swallowed quickly. In a longer dialogue of 12 exchanges, a group of 8 characters, including Anna Maria, Daniel, Ruth, James, Leah, Pastor Samuel, and Michael, talk about how small acts of service changed their congregation. Anna says, "I started a meal train. The bread comforted me more than words." Daniel admits, "I did not see it at first, but the meals steadied us." James asks, "Can service be an act of self-preservation as well as love?" Ruth answers, "Service always changes the server and the served." Leah adds, "I felt my bitterness soften when I scrubbed a stranger's kitchen." Pastor Samuel counsels, "Serve as worship," and Michael testifies, "Service connected him back to community." The scene blends sensory specifics such as warmth of plates, the clink of cutlery, the rough texture of dish towels, and the smell of rosemary. This block names 5 to 8 secondary characters and gives each action specific agency. The fourth secret is faith in the middle of storms, with biblical anchor Matthew 14:22-33 and Mark 5:25-34. We reconstruct a moment of fear in a hospital corridor where machines' beeps echo like a storm at sea, and fluorescent light blurs into white spray. A tense moment of 500 to 600 characters describes Ethan, paced by a window, rain trembling on the glass, voice soft and internal, remembering how Jesus calmed the sea and how the wind obeyed. He closes his eyes, tastes copper from his teeth, and decides to call his friend James. The internal conflict, memory, and decision form a compact, punctured tension that resolves when a new step of trust is taken. The fifth secret is forgive from the heart, citing passages such as Luke 23:34 and Colossians 3:13. We stage a reconstituted scene where an older brother confronts Ethan about a childhood debt, and the conversation is raw. 10 lines of dialogue expose shame, resentment, pleading, and then an offering of forgiveness that sounds like rain on hot stone. Sensory markers include the scratch of a chair leg, the stale coffee odor of regret, the coolness of a window pane, and the release like a breath exhaled slowly. Practical instructions list 3 steps: name the hurt, pray the truth to God. Practice releasing by a symbolic act, and, if appropriate, communicate a short, clear statement. The sixth secret is accept the will of God with Gethsemane, Luke 22:42, Abraham's readiness in Genesis 22, and Job's trust. We present a moment of surrender, where Ethan folds his hands, tastes salt from a tear, feels the grain of the Bible under his palm, and speaks, "Lord, not my will, but yours." This scene brings a 500 to 600 character tension that collapses into peace, not because things are fixed, but because the heart has been offered up. Technical process descriptions appear at moments, showing how to practice surrender with accessible steps, including a 5-minute daily examen, a habit of journaling desires and outcomes, and a commitment to seek counsel in a local church or trusted friend. Those procedures are explained clearly in about 300 characters each to be practical and credible. Midway through the narrative, at roughly the point where the second secret has landed, we invite you to interact. We pause to acknowledge feelings of fear and fatigue and then ask a simple question. Which of these secrets touched you most today? Type the word trust, prayer, service, faith, forgiveness, or surrender, and share one short sentence about why. We will read and be encouraged by your words. This call to comment is a pastoral invitation that values brevity and community. After the comment invitation, the story continues, showing how communal responses strengthen one another and lead to concrete mutual aid. Several characters offer to help Ethan, including Anna bringing bread, Maria organizing a list of tasks, Daniel contacting a job network,
Ruth driving to appointments, James providing financial advice, Leah offering childcare, and Pastor Samuel leading a prayer meeting. Each character action is named and woven into the narrative. There are 3 moments of tension crafted to be visceral and resolved with grace. The first moment is a raw phone call where Ethan learns the clinic needs another test. His hands shake, the phone feels slick with sweat, the sound of the operator's voice is clinical, and the kitchen light blinks. He remembers his father's disappointed face, and the memory rises like nausea. The passage stretches 500 to 600 characters, showing inner dialogue, memory, and decision to call a friend instead of retreating. The second moment of tension occurs when a community meeting divided opinion about whether to help the family financially. Voices rise, the air tastes metallic, the room smells of takeout food and coffee like armor. Accusations float like debris. After a heavy silence, Pastor Samuel quotes Hebrews 12:1-2 and calls the assembly to run with perseverance the race set before us. This calms the room and leads to a plan. The third moment is a night of insomnia, where Ethan hears the quiet whisper that he is too broken to be used. The darkness presses in, the air is thick, the mattress creaks, a neighbor's dog barks. He slides out of bed, eats a piece of bread, and opens his Bible to Psalm 46, where an image of God as refuge begins to unmake the lie. Each tension is sensory, internal, and moves toward a concrete response. Midway through, we also include a short technical explanation of how to organize a church meal train and pastoral care schedule in about 300 characters, so viewers can implement service steps locally. The narrative moves toward restoration, with testimonies and a structured epilogue that shows progress over time. Epilogue 1 month later paints a picture of small, steady change in around 700 characters. Ethan has a part-time work shift that hums with new routines. He wakes to pale morning light and drinks bitter coffee, but now shares it with Maria some mornings. He has a rhythm of short prayers before each shift, and his son is sleeping through the night more often. The congregation gathers monthly to bring meals, and the house that once felt hollow now smells of baking. Ethan hears fewer whispers of the quiet and more stories of neighbors returning favors. He practices forgiveness with one phone call that produces relief and a hesitant laugh. In the kitchen, the radio plays low, and he folds laundry with hands that feel calloused but steady. This month is not the end of struggle, but a visible proof that the hidden power of Jesus is making roots. Epilogue 3 months later expands into another 700 characters, showing deeper signs of growth. Ethan's job becomes steady, and he meets with a small group for accountability and study. The pastor invites him to lead a short devotion about trusting the Father, and he trembles, but accepts. His wife joins a women's circle and begins to teach Sunday school. The community builds a small fund to help with medical bills, and Michael leads a service project that repairs an elderly neighbor's porch. Forgiveness becomes a repeated practice, with one reconciliation that brings both parties to tears and relief. Ethan's nights are still sometimes restless, but his mornings increasingly start with prayer, not panic. His faith feels tested and refined, like silver buffed by fire. Epilogue 6 months later closes the arc in about 800 characters and shows a transformation where endurance becomes a habit. The family hosts a neighborhood dinner, and the smell of roasted vegetables and warm bread fills the house. Ethan tells his son a story from Scripture, and the boy asks questions with bright curiosity. The quiet still knocks, but now message threads from friends appear through the day like anchors. Ethan volunteers at the shelter, and his service furthers his healing. The congregation has a new ministry called Hands at the Table, and Anna leads with joyful competence. The community stories accumulate like bricks of a house being rebuilt, and peace is the kind that lives not only in absence of trouble, but in the steadiness of shared burden and prayer. The practical applications at the end are clear and brief, so you can start today. Choose one secret to practice for 7 days. Write down 3 things you cannot control, and pray naming them by name. Schedule 2 5-minute prayer pauses daily. Serve someone in a small, tangible way this week, even if it is a single meal. Practiced a brief forgiveness ritual by writing down a hurt and then binding it and asking God to carry it. Finally, in a quiet moment, say, "Lord, not my will, but yours," and wait for a small sign of peace. If these practices are helpful, consider joining a small group at your church or bringing this plan to a friend for mutual encouragement. If this message blessed you and you want more reflections that combine scripture with practical steps, subscribe to the channel, join our community, and share this video with someone who needs it. May the peace of Christ be your strength today and always. If this helped, subscribe and join us as we walk together in faith and endurance.